The question we are discussing in cognitive training today is, why should organizations be made smaller? This is actually a conclusion, but why should the organization be made smaller? Because the collective did not act. One of the greatest mysteries of human society is that the minority always wins over the majority. Whether it is politics, society, military, culture, or finance, this is the result. The Battle of Hot Spring Pass, where less wins more. In 479 BC, during the First World War of that era, the Greek city-states faced the invading Persian army. Xerxes, the king of kings who unified the East, wanted to take charge of the West as well, sending hundreds of thousands of troops. How many people are there in Greece? Athens is the largest city-state, and it can only send 3,000 or 4,000 heavy shields and armor. All the Greeks combined, that is, 10,000 men to fight. In the end, it was the Persians who lost. The first time Persia invaded Greece, the king of Sparta brought 300 people to resist the Persian army at the Thermal Spring Pass, and all of them were killed. 300 people blocked hundreds of thousands of people. Not surprising. Strange is that after all, they blocked for a long time. How to dot this? Less people are better organized. Each Greek heavy shield soldier was equipped with a shield, armor, pike, and short sword. The left hand held a 1-meter-long shield to protect the front, the helmet, breastplate, and knee pads to protect the head, chest, and legs respectively, and the right hand held the gun, and the short sword was used for backup. If there was only one person wearing this equipment, it would be a living target. Because it was too heavy, more than 25 kilograms, it could not move, and the right side of the body was exposed. Heavy shield soldiers must form a phalanx. Typical Greek phalanx, 8 rows in depth and limited width. Shield-armored soldiers are densely arranged, holding shields in their left hand and protected by their comrades on the right. The phalanx is extremely dense, squeezed to the point where people can suffocate. The shields are together to form the Great Wall. The spear is on the shoulder. There is no way to go, only to push forward. Such a giant human tank was the super weapon of that era, stabbing down, cutting down, and pushing down all the enemies in front of him. In this way, the 300 warriors of Sparta probably had nearly 40 people on the front, about 20 meters wide. If the terrain of Thermopylae matched, they would be condescending and blocking the main road. It would not be easy for the Persians to attack these 8 rows of human tanks. If it were thousands of Greek shields against the enemy, it would be like a hot knife into butter, and it would be a completely unfair battle. Before the rise of Rome, the phalanx of heavily armed Greek shields was invincible, and won all-important wars against various armies of other fighting styles. More people are paper tigers, fewer people are better organized, and the minority always defeats the majority. The zero contribution proposition of collective action. The difficulty of collective action, said Nobel laureate Mancur Olson, who straddles politics and economics. A collective either has few members, can coerce its members, or has other special arrangements to make its members take actions that are in the collective interest. Otherwise, rational members who put their own interests first will not take actions that are beneficial to the collective. This is Olson's famous zero contribution proposition. To translate, individuals do not do things that are in the interests of the collective. If they want to do it, either the number of people in the collective is small enough, or the collective can bully and lure. In his famous book, The Logic of Collective Action, Olson divides collectives into 3 categories by size. The first is the privileged collective. Olson uses the word privileged, which has nothing to do with privilege, but means that the collective size is small enough that individuals within it will always take actions that are in the collective interest. Because even if he alone takes the action and bears all the costs, his share of the benefits of the action is already large enough. In a privileged group, actions that are in the collective interest will always occur. For example, in a duopoly monopoly market, the oligarch will do everything possible to maintain its monopoly position. Another example is a shipwreck at sea. 10 people climb into a lifeboat, but the boat can carry 9 people, so you can rest assured that someone will be thrown down. The second type is a medium-sized collective. The collective size is medium, and the impact of the actions of individual members on the collective interest is neither decisive nor negligible. Whether individuals take actions that are in the collective interest is subject to a certain randomness. It may or may not be. The third type is the large collective. Olson calls it the latent group. Although there is a common interest, it is a loose sand. Individuals have no discernible influence on the collective interest. In economic terms, they are called price takers. In a potential collective action that is in the collective interest will not happen unless the collective can threaten or entice. Collective action does not happen because the common interest is not visible enough, even if it is clearly in front of each member. For example, everyone hates inflation, but when inflation comes, everyone will go to the streets to buy it and add fuel to the fire. The few always triumph over the many, because the privileged collective always triumphs over the large collective. Empires always collapse, but tribes live forever, and the family is everyone's eternal home. This is also the truth. The Chinese say that cultivating one's self-cultivation, building one's family, governing the country and pacifying the world, helping to smoothly move from oneself to others, from small to large, but it always backfires because others won't follow. Out of collective inaction. Olson's book was published 50 years ago, and we know more today. What he said is related to concepts such as prisoner's dilemma, hitchhiking, and the tragedy of the commons. Describing the same kind of phenomena, everyone makes rational decisions, but they cannot come up with choices that maximize benefits for everyone. In the prisoner's dilemma, in the face of loyalty or betrayal, everyone's best choice is betrayal. In the free rider phenomenon, in the face of public goods, everyone's best choice is to take advantage of it without paying the cost. In the tragedy of the commons, in the face of the common pond, everyone's best choice is to fish for all. How to get out of this trap of collective inaction? We also have a more subtle understanding today. Another Nobel laureate, Elinor Ostrom, has spent her life studying the governance of the commons. Her antidote is as follows: the problem of collective action can be solved if the users of public resources can set their own rules to determine who has the right and how to use the resources, effectively match the costs and benefits, supervise the implementation by themselves, or through those responsible to the users to supervise the implementation, and punish the offenders in a targeted manner. Ostrom's prescription is stakeholder autonomy. It rests on the reality, but also on the belief, that there is not just one kind of rational person in the world. There will always be others who are willing to cooperate, willing to give the group a chance, as long as the group gives them a chance. If others treat him kindly, he will reciprocate with kindness. There will also be some people who are jealous of evil, and they will bring their own dry food to punish those traitors, hitchhikers, and those who are exhausted. No matter how realistic the world is, there is still a little chivalrous in the world. The key, Ostrom says, is to identify who is rationally self-interested, who is a collaborator, and who is a punisher. As long as people are not completely uninformed about this, as long as judgments about who is what kind of person are a little more accurate than random guesses, then the world will not be completely ruled by rational self-interested people, and justice will have a place to live. Where does the information that helps us tell who is who and what comes from? Face-to-face communication, Ostrom said, and various interpersonal monitoring mechanisms for credibility. Pedestrian crossings are like monuments on the road, one of them. In fact, Ostrom's antidote can also be said to be a footnote to Olson's problem. it is clear that this antidote belongs only to smaller groups. As Ostrom admits, larger-scale commons quotas must use a hierarchical solution mechanism. Sun Tzu's Art of War has a similar view. Sun Tzu said that governing the many is like governing the few, and the score is the same. That is to say, it must be divided. Olson also expanded it in the logic of collective action. If a large collective wants to produce collective action, it must adopt a federal structure. And each member of the federal structure is a small collective, and a small collective can act. For example, Olson said that the reason why interest groups such as chambers of commerce are so powerful is that the business community is composed of subsectors, and enterprises in each subsector form professional chambers of commerce, which have strong lobbying capabilities on issues important to these industries. It is the only organized force in this small pond. On the contrary, it is too difficult for large collectives such as trade unions, farmers' unions, and consumer associations to act collectively. Organized small collectives can always win against unorganized large collectives. By extension, although the middle class as a whole can't change anything, alumni have the opportunity to change something. Any university has a huge number of alumni, ostensibly a potential collective, but it is also naturally a federal structure. And the alumni of any school are organized by department and class, which class is not a small group. Small groups can explode travel motivation. In fact, everyone saw the power of alumni. One thing to note is that the key to the disintegration of the large collective into the small is parallel federalism, not upper and lower bureaucracy. The Persians did not lack bureaucracy. Make the organization small. Today our story begins with the Greeks at war with the Persians, so let it end in another war story. U.S. Special Forces are well-trained and well-equipped, with drones in the sky and armored Humvees in the ground. This force is supposedly capable of crushing any visible enemy. But why can't it defeat Al-Qaeda in Iraq AQI? The AQI, small in number, poorly trained, poorly equipped and relying on messengers for communications, quickly emerged as one of the deadliest forces in Iraq, and later bred the Islamic State. AQI relies on a mesh structure that can withstand all kinds of attacks, with neither standard plane nor standard hierarchy. Take out a senior leader of AQI, and it will grow another one of its own. The U.S. military has taken down about 20 or so to figures of Al-Qaeda in Iraq over the years, but it's useless. When he woke up one day, the U.S. Special Operations Commander looked at the pile of orders waiting for him to sign and realized that he was the problem. The lines were too long, the actions were too expensive, and the decisions were too slow. The commander reorganized the structure of special operations, and the information flow was no longer bottom-up and top-down. Each operational unit flexibly allocated resources and made decisions. He no longer signed so many orders, ruled vertically, and focused on ensuring the smooth flow of information. As a result, a squad found and took out AQI Chief Zarqawi on its own. The story comes from the book Team of Teams, New Rules of Engagement for a Complex World by U.S. Special Operations Commander Jen McCresto. A large group would never be able to defeat a small group. What a large group could do was to turn itself into a small group. And the small groups could combine themselves autonomously to give full play to their other advantages and eliminate their opponents. Summary of this lecture. To sum up, what we are talking about today is that the minority wins the majority is the norm. So you have to make the organization small, because only a small group can unify interests and organize flexibly to deal with problems. Today's cognitive training is inspired by U.S. economist and sociologist Mansur Olson's early masterpiece, The Logic of Collective Action. You are welcome to share today's content with friends who need to manage a team. Thinking today. Today's question is, how big a group are you in? Do you think the group around you needs to be smaller? Why?